I wonder if you've ever played that game as a child. It's called Pass the Parcel. And I remember playing as a kid, and when my kids were young, we used to play it at birthday parties. And the kids sit in a circle, and a parcel is passed around the circle, and you pass it on, you pass it on, and pass it on. And there's some music being played in the background. And when the music stops, the person that's left holding the parcel can unwrap the parcel. And often there's like, it's just a layer. And you find, oh, there's another wrapping layer. Go through. And so what you do is um, the music starts again and you pass the parcel around, pass it around, then the music stops and it's repeated and eventually what happens is that the unwrapping happens and the child that gets to get it when the music stops, there is the present, there's the wealth, there's the gift. And often if it's for a birthday party, it's often the child that's having the birthday that gets the present. But I wonder what would happen if this is completely crazy thought, but um, they're passing the parcel around, and you give it to a child, and the child sees it and stuffs it under their shirt and takes off with the parcel, and everybody be grumpy and angry, wouldn't they? You're like, what's going on here? You know, you meant to pass the parcel. And if you ever played that game, you always sort of you get it with one hand and you pass it on to. There's always a reluctance like that. It's currently in my hands. Do I wait for the music to stop to pass it on? You know, it's like, oh, it's a risk to pass it on, but then you pass it on and you're just waiting for the next time you grab it and you hold it slowly and you pass it on. Look, what's it like to be given something totally unexpected? What do you do with it? Is there a kind of a hesitation or a reluctance to pass it on, to hold it into yourself? Here's a question. What if you were suddenly given 100 years worth of wages, right? And I'll explain that a bit further on. But say 100 years worth of wages, say like $5 million. I don't know. What would you do? Would you pass it on to somebody else? Give it away? How much hesitation is in you now that you've been given this gift? You got it. You got this bag of gold or whatever. You're going to give it away. And Jesus comes along and tells us what I'm calling living right side up in an upside down world parable. He does this all the time, gives out crazy sort of parables that just seem over the top and extreme to make a certain point. And this particular parable, it's normally called the parable of the talents, but I'm going to call it the parable of the joyful man. And so, what I've done is I've actually translated this passage into the Pearman unauthorized version. All right, the PUV. Hope you like it. So this is my take on the parable. All right. So here it comes, and it's from Matthew 25:14 to 30. So this is how I'm going to read it. Probably throw some theological rocks at me some stage. I don't know. But there was once a wealthy man who decided to take a very long journey. He was full of joy. All right, he was Mr. Joy, and his lifestyle pattern of was to give his wealth away and see it return with interest. And this filled him with joy. He would do it over and over again, seemingly forever. And he had some servants, all with different abilities to handle wealth. Some had watched him how he had invested by divestment. I like that. Invested by divestment, so giving it away. Others had quite a strange understanding of his investment style. They, for some strange reason, thought the man had stolen the money and that he was some kind of con man swindler. How could anybody be that good and that generous? That there must be a trick to this, you know. But the man was full of grace and decided to take a risk with his servants. So he called one of his servants over and he said, I'm going to go on a very long trip and I want you to look after some of my wealth for me. He then handed him 100 years worth of the man's wages. Now, I've done a little bit of a calculation and taking it from one Jesus days and blah 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 blah. And for New Zealand dollars, that would be like 4.8 million New Zealand dollars. In American, it would be $2.9 million. So he gave the first servant 100 years worth of wages. That's a lot of money in anyone's language. All right. And then another servant called him over, and he, in the same manner, gave him 50 years worth of wages. Incredible amount. Now, the third servant, the one who had some really strange beliefs about this wonderful man's goodness, he gave him just 20 years worth of the man's wages. Still a huge amount. So immediately what happened is the first and the second servants, because they had seen how the master um, invested by divestment, went and passed the money on quickly. Boom, gone. And quickly it came back with 100% return rate. So it doubled the money. The first servant now had something like $7.2 million, full of joy. Wow. The second servant had about $3 million. Wow. Enjoyment. Divestment, investment, strategy. The third servant, the one who really didn't know the man, went, you know what he did? He went and dug a hole and buried it. That fortune was safe and secure. You see, it was all about the servant's security. There was no looking outward, no thought for others. It was all about holding it into himself. Maybe like a child in that game, holding it there. The wealthy man, well, there's no generous flow, and the passing of the parcel had stopped. Boom, stopped. The wealthy man, full of joy, returned from his journey, which seemed like an eternity, and called his servants over to hear what they had done. They used it. Had they found the levels of joy and freedom that he had eternally danced with? Well, the first and the second servants came and presented the return of their modelling of the man's generosity, investment by divestment. The man was thrilled by what the servants had done. The servants had discovered the route to joy was through risk taking generosity, of giving grace and wondering where and how it would be returned. The third servant was called to show what he had done. Well, so he went off and got the spade and dug up the gift where it had been hidden. He brushed off the dirt, handed it back to the master. Nice, safe, secure, but soiled by fear. The joyful man was now furious. He said to the risk averse servant, "What got into your thinking that I was some kind of con man, that I was harsh? I wasn't trying to play a trick. Have you noticed I live in a lifestyle of generosity? I give, and it always comes back to me in some way. You could have invested it with a bank and gotten 3% interest, but instead you did nothing with it. You buried it." He was so disappointed that he gave them the man with the soiled money, he gave the money to the other two. And then he told the other man, "You're not in my presence anymore." And so therefore he was now in a place without joy. And if you come over to the website in the blog post, you'll see how I've worked out all this money. It's kind of over the top craziness, which is typical of Jesus's parables. They sort of like meant to make you sit up and think. So whenever I read a parable of Jesus, I have two questions. The first one, who was the first person mentioned in the parable? The second question is, what is the most important relationship lesson to be learned here? Well, the first person in the parable, and it's actually, this is what the parable is about, is the man going on a long journey, who is incredibly wealthy and incredibly joyful. This man takes risks, enormous risks, and knows people's abilities to handle what is given to them, but he still wants to try them out. He knows that some people can't handle too much, but still wants them to learn. I read this quote from John Flavel. Small boats have but small, narrow sails. And I like that picture. Like, you look at a little tiny boat and it's got a small sail. That's all it can carry. And some people are like small boats. They can't carry much. and they have small sails, so they can only catch a small amount of the wind of providence. They're small. They're not going to go far, not going to take much. Whereas some people I've observed is that they have grown and expanded themselves into large boats and are able to catch large amounts. They've got large sails and they're able to catch large amounts of providence. They are able to do incredible things because they've built out their sense of generosity. They've got more capacity to carry and to give out. I personally, I want to be constantly building out my boat, getting a bigger boat, bigger sails, have wider and larger sails to catch the unseen winds of providence. So my sails are up, boom, I'm off. The relationship lesson, pass it on quickly. You know, when I first read this and I was praying, and the biggest thing that jumped out at me was that this parable is actually about grace. It's not about money. It's not about money. Um, it's about grace. Sure, it can be transferred over to money, but it's first and foremost about grace. Undeserved kindness. The servants did nothing to deserve these over the top, outlandish gifts. They were servants. Um, and I think the best definition of grace can be found in contrasting it with its cousins. Justice is getting what we deserve, mercy is not getting what we deserve, grace is getting what we don't deserve. I pass on grace quickly. That's what I want to do. I want to, as soon as I get grace in my hand, I want to pass it on to others. I give it away so quickly. This is my goal. I want to give it away so quickly that my left hand doesn't know what my right hand is doing. And there's, Jesus talked about that too. In one hand, through to the next hand, gone to the next child in the game. Quick, without hesitation. Look, if I hold on to grace, if I dig a hole and hide it, then it kind of loses its glorious potency to do something powerful in the world. Perhaps it's a gift of grace you need to give to others, but perhaps it's a gift of grace you need to give to yourself, to that little child that's hurt. Um, and there is a providential plenty where that came from. You've been wounded. You know, life hasn't been a Garden of Eden. You've been hurt, you've hurt others. And then God drops in your lap the freedom of choice to risk it and give it all away. He gives you a lifetime's worth of grace and kindness. What do you do with it? Do you say thank you and I'll just keep it to myself? No, God wants you to risk it, give it away. You want justice, lots of it. And for those who have kind of stuck a spear into your side, compassion lubricates your thinking, and you come to mercy. Forgive them, for they don't have a clue of what they're doing. And then grace passes on the resurrection hope to others. You grace yourself, you grace them, and then grace comes back to you twice over. It may come in a completely different form, but it still smells of Garden of Eden red roses. And deep down, you know it's Providence smiling its joy filled face at you. Here's a poem. I found a coin, totally unplanned, passed it on to another. Where would this joy land? I see a sunrise, Providence on display. I want to share it with all, give it all away. In one hand, out the other. While the music plays, give it to another. What a silly game. Could the kingdom be like that? Giving it all away, holding nothing back? I think I'll keep some grace, hide it in a pit. I don't want to share what I've been given. You don't deserve the least of it. But slowly I'll grow cold, indifferent to your call. Hide it in a dark hole. I'm going to keep it all. I pass the parcel on. Open hands that need to be. Open hands they need to be. Letting go and taking a risk. Finding I'm free. I find a coin. Totally unplanned for me. I pass it on to another. 2 coins worth comes back to me. It may not be in a coin. It may be in another form. But learning to listen this way. creates for me a new norm. Creates for me a new norm. I pass it on before it hits the ground. Providential blessing, a glorious, joyful sound. And this is part of a series I'm doing on talking about providence. And I've set up a 40-day challenge. Here's the challenge. For the next 40 days, spend some reflective time at night and journal 10 ways in which God has provided for you during the day. Write them down. I saw how God provided for me, dot, 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 and such and such. It's not a list of thank yous, it's not a list of blessings, it's an observation of providence, of providing for you and for others. Hey, hope you found this helpful. Send me an email. I recently got an email from someone via my YouTube channel, which was awesome. It's barry@turningthepage.co.nz. You may like to click on the link below and read the blog post. There's some other content there, but I hope it helps you. Learn to pass it through. Investment via divestment. Okay, bye.